Now, let me come closer so that you can hear me out. If you want to increase the productivity of your pig farm, one of the key areas that you have to focus on is the feeding of the sow or gilt. That is the female pigs that are on your farm. Now, why should we focus on the sow's feeding? You know that the sow is the one that is going to produce piglets on the farm. And so the more they produce piglets, the more your pig farm grows. So if you do not focus on the feeding of the sow, you're not going to get the productivity levels that you want to achieve. So now the feeding of the sow or gilt is in three stages. We have when the sow or the gilt is pregnant, that is the gestation feed. We have when the sow or gilt is breastfeeding or lactating, that is the lactating feed. And we have the third one being the dry sow or gilt feed. That is when the sow is no longer lactating. The feed that is given to the sow at that particular point is the dry sow feed. So there are three feeds for sows. Let's note them: gestation feed, lactating feed, and then the dry sow or gilt feed. So in today's video, we'll be mainly looking at feed formulation for gestation or pregnant sows and gilts. And then we'll also be looking at the daily kilograms of feed that you should give to the pigs during pregnancy. There are different stages in their pregnancy cycle. So at all the stages, they need different amounts of feed per day. So we'll be looking at all that in this video. So let's get right into it. So today I'm really going to take my time because I want you to understand the whole concept of feeding, especially when it comes to sows that are pregnant. The feed formulation and the amount of feed that we are giving to the pig has a certain purpose that it is going to accomplish in the pig. So we are not just doing things anyhow. Do you get it? The purpose of giving the sow quality feed and giving the sow the right amount of feed is to ensure that we maintain the sow's body condition, meaning that we don't want the sow to lose so much weight during the pregnancy. We also want the sow to be able to carry the pregnancy successfully. So giving the sow the right amount of nutrients will ensure that no miscarriages or stillbirths occur in the aftermath. 3, we also want the fetuses in the pregnant sow to develop properly. And so we have to make sure that the nutrients that we are supplying is enough for the sow and also enough for the growing fetuses. 4, also we want to feed the sow in such a way that it is prepared for farrowing. If the sow doesn't have enough back fat to support it during farrowing, it may have prolonged periods of farrowing and it may even farrow piglets that are dead upon arrival. Also, we want to give the sow quality feed and enough feed in order to prepare it for a smooth transition from pregnancy to farrowing and then to lactation, so that during lactation it will be able to produce enough milk for the piglets. Also, we want to give the sow quality feed to farrow large litters, a lot of piglets, and also not just a lot of piglets, but piglets that are healthy upon arrival. And so if you want to achieve all these things that I've mentioned, there are two things that we have to do. We have to ensure that we give the sow quality feed that contains all the nutrients in the right proportions. And then number 2, we have to ensure that we are giving the sow the right amount of feed daily. And then this daily amount of feed is based on certain factors, and we'll break those down very soon. So let's look at the point 1. We said quality feed that contains nutrients in the right amount. So what are the required nutrients that the sow needs during gestation or during pregnancy? So you know that there are sows and then there are gilts, right? So sows are the female pigs that have more than 1 litter. And then the gilts are the female pigs that have been selected for breeding but have not yet farrowed any litter. They have never given birth. That is gilt. So for sows that have only 1 litter, we refer to them as primiparous sows. That is parity 1. They have only 1 litter. They farrowed only once. And then for sows that are farrowed more than 1, that is, they have 2 plus litters, they are called the multiparous sows. So in the nutrient requirements, both gilt and primiparous sows have similar nutritional requirements. And then now the multiparous sows also have their own nutritional requirements. So let's look at the nutritional requirements for gilt and primiparous sows. For gilts and primiparous sows, they require a crude protein content of about 13 to 14%, with 14% being the recommended levels. And then they require a crude fiber content of 5 to 6%. And by experimentation, the allowable levels of crude fiber can go as high as 10%. It is allowed, but then the most recommended is 5 to 6%. And then for the amino acids, they require a lysine content of about 0.7% and a methionine content of about 0.4%. So now let's look at the nutritional requirements for sows. The multiparous sows, those that have 2 plus letters or from parity 2 onwards. For these sows, they require a crude protein content of 12 to 13%, with 12% being the recommended levels. They require a crude fiber content of 5 to 6% and up to 10% is allowed. And then for the amino acids, they require a lysine content of about 0.6% and a methionine content of about 0.37%. So to make quality feed, these are the nutritional requirements that we should go by in our feed formulation. And so when we get to making our feed formulations, we'll be using these nutritional requirements just like we did for the growing pigs, the finisher and then the starter. We'll be formulating 6 different feeds for our gestation sows, and we'll formulate 6 different feed for the gestation gilts because they have different nutritional requirements. So we cannot give them the same feed. Do you get it? So remember that also we said to achieve our goals, aside giving the quality feed, we also have to ensure that we give the right amount of feed daily. And we said they are based on certain factors. So now what are the factors that will inform you on the amount of feed you should give your sow in a day? Now, one, the stage of gestation that the sow has gotten to. And this is basically the months or the period of time in which the sow has been pregnant. So they are divided into different stages. And then 2, the parity number. That is the number of litters that the sow has farrowed before. And then 3, the body size or preferably the body condition of the sow. That will also inform you on the amount of feed you should give that particular sow. And then 4, the health status of the sow. So based on maybe some sickness or some signs that the sow is showing, you can change its diet and give it a certain amount of feed so that it is able to recover faster. So how would these factors influence the amount of feed you should give to your pigs? So let's take the first one, the stage of gestation. So you know that in pigs, the gestation period is divided into 3. We have the early gestation period, we have the mid gestation period, and we have the late gestation period. So at the different stages, the sow uses the feed for different purposes. So in the early gestation period, which is a period between 0 to 30 days, the sow is being fed in order to maintain its body condition. So the main purpose of feeding the sow at that stage is to maintain its body condition. So you don't have to increase the amount of feed that you give to the sow at that point. At that stage, if you make a mistake and increase the amount of feed, it can affect the development of the embryo, and then it may lead to miscarriages. So don't increase the amount of feed you are giving the sow at the early gestation stage. Now let's look at the mid gestation period. That is between 30 to 75 days. Over here too, the fetus is still small. So the feed that you are giving to the sow is mainly to maintain the body condition of the sow. But then at this stage, you can increase or decrease the feed that you give to the sow. You can increase the amount of feed you give to the sow if only the sow is too thin. And if the sow is overweight or too fat, you can decrease the amount of feed that you give to the sow. So how do you even tell if your sow is thin or fat? You will come down to that. We will discuss that very soon. The body condition of the sow, we'll discuss that soon. So let's look at the late gestation period. That is the stage from 75 days till farrowing. So in the late gestation period, the fetus begins to develop very fast, and then the sow still needs to maintain its body condition. So it means that at this stage, the feed you are giving to the sow is for 2 things: to support the fast developing fetus, and then also to help the sow maintain its body condition. So since the sow needs feed for these 2 purposes, you have to increase the amount of feed, especially in the last 3 to 4 weeks. Increase the feed by about 1 kilogram so that the sow can get enough to maintain its body and also support the developing fetus. So in the early gestation period, the feed that you were already giving to the sow, continue giving the sow the same amount of feed. For sows, that is the multiparous sows, you have to feed them about 2.4 to 2.8 kilograms of feed in a day. And then for gilts and primiparous sows, you have to feed them with about 2.2 to 2.5 kilograms of feed in a day. In the mid-gestation period, for all sows and gilts, you just maintain the amount of feed that you were giving them in the early gestation period. So let's say if you were giving them 2.2, maintain the 2.2. If you were giving them 2.5, maintain the 2.5. So for gilts, you maintain the same 2.2 to 2.5 kilograms of feed in a day. And then for the multiparous sows, you maintain the 2.4 to around 2.5 or 2.8 in a day. Now the change comes in the late gestation period. In the late gestation period, you have to increase the amount of feed that you were giving the sow by 1 kilogram. So if in the mid gestation period you were giving the sow about 2.5 kilograms, then in the late gestation period, about 3 to 4 weeks to farrowing, you have to give the sow 3.5 kilograms. That is 2.5 plus 1 kilogram. So 3.5 kilograms of feed in a day. And the same for the gilts. If you were giving them, let's say 2.2 kilograms of feed, you have to add 1 kilogram. And then you give them 3.2 kilograms of feed in a day. So number 3, I said the body size or the body condition of the sow can also determine the amount of feed that you give the sow in a day. And then now this is only for the mid gestation period. That is from 30 to 75 days. That is the only time that you can increase or decrease the amount of feed you are giving the sow based on the body condition of the sow. So let's look at it. Let me insert this real quick and then it will make it easier for you to understand. So this scale is referred to as the body condition score, the BCS. That is the body condition of your pig, how your pig appears. And this scale is able to tell us if our pigs are too thin or too fat or intermediate. So for the body condition score, we look at the ribs, the shoulders, the backbone, anywhere that bone can show on the pig. That is what we use to determine if the pig is fat or extremely slim or intermediate. So on the scale from 1 to 5, for the first group is the emaciated pigs. Now these emaciated pigs, they are very thin. Just by looking at them, you can tell that this sow is very thin. You see their bones showing. You see their ribs out, their shoulder bones, their back, everything is protruding. You can literally see their bones. Those sows are referred to as emaciated sows. They are very thin. Now the second group is the thin sows. So these ones, you will not see their bones protruding from their body. But then when you touch the sow, you immediately feel the bones. Once you touch it without applying any pressure, just by touching it, you feel the bones. Those ones are thin sows. Now the group 3 are the intermediate or the ideal sows. That is how a sow should be. So those ones, when you look at the sow is fit. When you touch the sow, you cannot feel the bones unless you exert pressure or you press before you can feel the bone. That is an ideal sow. That is how your sow should be. Group 4 are the fat sows. Maybe just by looking at the sow, you can't tell if it is fat or not. But then when you touch the sow and you even exert pressure, you will not feel the bones. There's a lot of fat on the body of the sow. So when you press, you will not feel the bones. Those ones are fat. And then the group 5 is the very fat sows. Those are the obese or overweight sows. So those ones, just by looking at them, you can tell that this sow is fat. You don't even have to touch. You don't have to exert any pressure. Just by looking at the sow, you see that this sow is fat. Now, at the mid-gestation period, we want the sow to be ideal, to be part of group 3. So what do? If you look at your sow during gestation and it falls in group 1, that is the emaciated or the very thin sows, then you have to add an additional 0.5 or 0.6 kilograms of feed to the feed that you were already giving the sow. So if you were giving the sow about 2.5 kilograms, now you have to give the sow an additional 0.5 or 0.6 kilograms So bringing the total feed to 3 kilograms. Now, if you look at your sow and then it falls among the thin sows, you have to add an additional 0.3 kilograms of feed to what you're already giving the sow. So if we're giving the sow 2.5, now you give the sow 2.8 kilograms of feed. Now, if your sow falls in the ideal, that is what you want. So don't increase or decrease the feed. Just maintain the feed that you are giving to the sow. Now, if you look at your sow and then it falls in group 4, that is the fat sows, you have to reduce the feed you are giving the sow by 0.3 kilograms. So if you were giving the sow, say, 2.5 kilograms, now you have to give the sow 2.2 kilograms. And then you monitor it till it is now at the ideal stage, at the group 3 stage. Do you get it? So you monitor. If the sow gets to that level, then you are okay. And then for the obese or the fat sows, you have to reduce their feed also by about 0.5 or 0.6 kilograms. So if we're feeding the sow, let's say 2.8 kilograms, you have to reduce it by 0.5 kilograms. So now you give the sow about 2.3 kilograms of feed. Do you get it? So all these factors will inform the kilograms of feed that you have to give to your sow. And remember that I said you can only increase or decrease the feed amount in the mid-gestation period between 30 to 75 days. You don't do it before and you don't do it after. Please, just within the mid-gestation period. That is your only chance to get your soul to come to the ideal body condition. That is the only chance you have. So that is where you can do your changes and make sure that your soul is in the right body condition. If in the early gestation period your soul is fat, leave it. Don't do anything. Just wait patiently. Because any changes that you make during the early gestation period can affect the development of the fetuses. Do you get it? So don't make any changes over there. Just wait patiently till the mid gestation period. So this is basically telling you that for all the sows on your farm, you don't have to give them the same kilograms of feed because you may have a sow that is fat, you may have a sow that is very thin, you may have a sow that is thin. They all require different feeds. You have to adjust their feeds. So this is just something you should note and it will help you. Maybe you'll be thinking, why is this body condition thing so important? It is very important because it will help you to monitor your soul so that you can adjust the feeding levels to suit it. And then the soul will have the right body size in the gestation period. And having the right body size during gestation will decrease problems in farrowing. If you notice, maybe if you notice on your farm, if you have a sow that is fat, you just monitor it. You see that during farrowing, it may have prolonged farrowing periods. It will struggle during farrowing. And why would it struggle? If it is too fat, the excess fat will cover the cervix and then the uterus. And this is what will cause the complications. And it can even lead to death of piglets upon arrival, which is stillbirth. It can lead to stillbirth. So it is very important to monitor the body condition. If you don't monitor the body condition of your sow, it can even cause problems in the next breeding phase. Like if you use it in the next cycle, it may affect the fertility of your sow. It may cause your sow to produce very small litters in the next breeding cycle. And it can even affect the production of milk of your sows in the next breeding cycle. And it may even lead to miscarriages. The embryo will die. It will not even develop. It may lead to miscarriages in the sow. So it is very important to monitor the body condition of your sow. And if all this is happening, it means that your sow is even at a risk. Not monitoring the body condition of your sow can also reduce the longevity of your sow. Because if you don't monitor the condition and the sow is either too thin or too fat, it will cause a whole lot of problems. Fertility issues, it can cause lameness in the pig, it will affect the pig's bones, a whole lot, and that will reduce the lifespan of the sow. Now also the amount of feed that you give to your sow or even the quality of the feed that you give to your sow can change based on the health conditions or the health status of your sow. So let's say you're having a sow and you realize that the sow is lame, that is, it's having problems walking or it is struggling to stay on its feet. It means that you have to adjust the feed. You have to increase the nutrients, the minerals. You have to increase the amount of zinc, the copper, the magnesium content of the feed. Add vitamins, selenium. So at that point that the sow has this health problem of lameness, giving these additional nutrients to the sow will help it recover. Do you get it? So let's say that the sow has poor appetite What can you do about that? You can't say that because I've prepared feed and the sow must eat 2.2 kilograms or 2.5 kilograms. The sow won't eat it if you don't correct it. So you have to add nutrients that will boost the appetite of the sow to be able to eat. Do you get it? So you have to add minerals and vitamins. You can add zinc, vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, niacin, riboflavin. Those ones will help the soul to regain its appetite. Do you get it? So based on the health status of the soul, you can adjust the feed to help the soul recover. So all these point to the fact that the quantity of feed that you give to sows is not one. You don't have a fixed number to say, I give my sow 2.5 kilograms during pregnancy. No, the amount of feed that you give varies. Even on one pig farm, you can get sows consuming different amounts of feeds based on the body conditions of the sow, the health status of the sow, the stage of gestation that the sow is at, or the stage of the pregnancy. All these will determine the amount of feed that you have to give to the sow. So don't stick to one figure. Adjust the kilograms of feed that you give to your sow during the gestation period based on everything that we have discussed today, and that will help your sow. So now let's move right on to make our feed formulations. I know that is what most of you are waiting for, the feed formulations. Now to me, even though the feed formulation is very important, the crude fiber, crude protein, everything has to be intact. Even though that is important, the amount of feed that you give to the sow is very important, because let's say that your feed has all the nutrients but you're not giving the sow enough or the right kilograms. It means the sow will be lacking in nutrients even though your feed has the right nutrients. Do you get me? So let's move right on and make our feed formulations. So we are going to make formulations for the gilts and then for the sows, and like I mentioned earlier, we'll be making 6 different formulations for the gilts and we're making 6 different formulations for the sows because they have different nutritional requirements. So first, let's make the feed formulations for our gilts and primiparous sows. That is our sows that have only 1 liter. They have similar nutrient requirements as our gilts. So let's make their feed. So first, let's look at the nutritional requirements for gilts and primiparous sows. Like we stated earlier, they need a crude protein content of about 13 to 14%. And then for our feed formulation, we'll be using 14%. For the crude fiber content, they need 5 to 6% and then up to 10%. But we'll be using the 5 to 6% interval. And then for lysine, they need 0.7%, and then methionine, they need 0.4%. So we use the Pearson square to generate one feed, and then based on the feed formulation that we'll get from the Pearson square, we'll use the try and error method to adjust it to develop our 6 different feeds, where we can then insert our alternative ingredients into it. So for the Pearson square, we'll be using maize, wheat bran, soya beans, and fish meal. So using the Pearson square, where our crude protein requirement is 14%, and then we'll be combining maize and wheat bran in the ratio of 2:1.5. And then we'll be combining soya beans and fish meal in the ratio of 2:1. So I'm not going to go into all the detailed calculations because I have done detailed calculations in the previous videos. So you can refer to that. So based on the ratio of maize and wheat bran that I stated and the ratio of soya bean and fish meal that I stated, this is the feed formulation that I arrived at. For 100 kilograms of feed for pregnant gilts or primiparous sows, it should contain 50 kilograms of maize, 38 kilograms of wheat bran, 8 kilograms of soya beans, and 4 kilograms of fish meal. So now let's go ahead and use our table that we made. Do you remember this table? So we are going to use this table where we have our nutrients, our ingredients, then our different feed 1, feed 2, up to feed 6. For our nutrients, we have our energy ingredients, which are our carbohydrates. We have our proteins, our fiber, our amino acids, and then we have our minerals and vitamins, and then the additives. So for our carbohydrates, we'll be using maize and cassava meal. For our proteins, we'll be using fish meal, soya beans, and groundnut cake. For our feed formulation for the pregnant, gilts, and sows, we'll be eliminating blood meal and bone meal. Why am I doing this? You can add them to your feed, all right. But remember that I said blood meal and bone meal are to boost the protein content. And look at this feed that we are making. We just need 14% crude protein. So we don't need that much proteins. Do you get it? And also, bone meal and blood meal can be very problematic in the sense that they can develop bacteria. Do you get it? And then when given to the sow, just imagine our sow is pregnant and then we need it to produce piglets for us. And then we go and give it bone meal and blood meal that has not been processed well or stored well. And then it transmits diseases to our soul. Look at the losses that will incur. So to me, blood meal and bone meal, just don't add them to the source feed. But then if you want, you can still add them. If only you processed it yourself or you trust the source from which you are getting your bone meal and blood meal. Now let's proceed. For our fiber ingredients, we'll be using wheat bran, spent grains, and then PKC. And then our amino acids are the lysine and then the methionine. And then for our minerals and vitamins and then the additives, we'll be using the dicalcium phosphate, premix, salt, toxin binder, enzymes, and then we'll be adding something new. We'll be adding probiotics to our feed. Some can even add antioxidants to it. So for the additives, anything that you try and you know that it can help the sow during gestation, you can add it to your feed. So for our feed formulations, these are the additives that we are going to add. So let's put in the values which we had from our feed one, which was generated by our Pearson square calculation. So maize was 50 kilograms, fish meal was 4 kilograms, soya beans was 8 kilograms, and then wheat bran was 38 kilograms. So if you check the lysine and then the methionine content of this feed, it is below the requirement. And so we need 70 grams of lysine and then 70 grams of methionine to top up the lysine and methionine content in the feed. And for our minerals and vitamins and then the additives, we'll be adding 1.5 kilograms of dicalcium. So you realize that the dicalcium you're adding to the feed for the pregnant sow or gilt is more than what we added to the feed for starters, growers, and finishers, right? We added 1 kilogram for them. But then for a pregnant sow, it has higher needs of phosphorus and then calcium. And then it needs some also for the developing fetus. And then 2.5 kilograms of premix. You remember that for the finisher and then the grower and those ones, we use 1 kilogram. But then for the sow, we need more minerals and vitamins because it is pregnant. Some recommend 2 to 3 kilograms of premix. So we are taking the average. We'll be using 2.5 kilograms of premix. We'll be adding 300 grams of salt, 80 grams of toxin binder, and then we'll be using 100 grams of enzymes. So for the enzymes, you can add a cocktail of enzymes. That's a mixture of different enzymes. Or some also add only phytase. The phytase enzyme helps to release phosphorus from the feed for the sow to use because the sow has higher needs of phosphorus. So it is recommended to add some amount of phytase, or if you get a cocktail of enzymes, you can also add it. So we'll be adding 100 grams of enzyme to enable the pig to utilize the nutrients that are present in the feed. It also helps the sow to break down the fiber, the proteins, and the carbohydrates better. And then now for the sow, we are introducing a new additive, that's the probiotics. Now the probiotics is more useful in the last 4 weeks before farrowing. So if you have your feed, it is recommended to add the probiotics in the last 4 weeks before farrowing, and it will help both the piglet and then the sow. So for the piglets, it will improve their immune system when they are born, and then it will also improve their weaning weight. It will also reduce death of piglets after birth. It will also increase the appetite of the piglet upon birth. And so after a while, they'll be able to consume the crib feed more. Now for the sow, the probiotics will help improve on the sow's performance, general performance in all areas, fertility, gut health, a lot of areas. It would improve the performance of the sow on all levels, especially during farrowing. So for this probiotics, we'll be adding about 100 to 200 grams. So based on where you are buying this from and the specifications of the manufacturer, you can add that. So all these minerals and additives that I've mentioned, they are different manufacturers, different companies, and they give instructions. But then this is the general amounts that you can add to your feed. Now for this feed one, it has a crude protein content of 14.1% and a crude fiber content of 5.41%. And so it meets the requirement. We said gilts need 14% crude protein and 5 to 6% fiber. So it meets the requirement. So let's go ahead and use the try and error method to generate our other feed formulations. For the feed one, you can see that we used only conventional ingredients. So for the rest of the feeds, we'll be incorporating our alternative ingredients, bringing in our spent grains and all the other ones, BKC, granite cake. So let's go ahead and do that. For our feed two, we'll be using maize, soya beans, wheat bran, spent grains, and then PKC. So we are not going to use fish meal again. Now we'll be using 60 kilograms of maize, 10 kilograms of soya beans. For our fiber section, we'll be using 10 kilograms each of all the fiber ingredients. So 10 kilograms of wheat bran, 10 kilograms of spent grains, and 10 kilograms of PKC. So if you look at this feed formulation, it is not meeting the requirements of lysine and methionine. So we'll be adding 100 grams of lysine and 120 grams of methionine, and that will meet the requirements. And then we'll also add minerals and vitamins, just like we did in the feed one, the same thing. So let's just repeat it over there. So this feed 2 has a crude protein content of 14.3% and a fiber content of 6.42%, and that meets the requirements that we've already stated. So let's make our feed 3. For feed 3, we'll be using maize, cassava meal, soya beans, wheat bran, and then PKC. So we'll use 40 kilograms of maize, and then we'll be replacing some amount of maize with cassava meal. So cassava meal can replace up to 10 to 20% of maize in a pregnant gilt or sows diet. Do you get it? So we'll be using 40 kilograms of maize, 10 kilograms of cassava meal, 12 kilograms of soya beans, 23 kilograms of wheat bran, and 15 kilograms of PKC. So we'll be adding 100 grams of lysine and 140 grams of methionine in order to meet the requirements. And then for the minerals and vitamins and then the additives, we'll use the same thing again. And then for this feed 3, it has a crude protein content of 14.1% and a fiber content of 6.6%, which meets the requirements. If you are doing this formulation on your own, you have to be doing try and error. And that is what I've done and generated these feeds. So for our feed 4, we'll also be using 52 kilograms of maize, 13 kilograms of cassava meal, 4 kilograms of fish meal, 5 kilograms of granite cake, 11 kilograms of spent grains, and 15 kilograms of PKC. Now to this feed, we'll be adding 150 grams of lysine and 100 grams of methionine. And then we'll add our minerals and vitamins and additives again. This feed has a crude protein content of 14.2% and a crude fiber content of 6.5%, which meets the requirements. So now let's make our feed 5. For feed 5, we'll be using 55 kilograms of maize, 15 kilograms of cassava meal, 10 kilograms of soya beans, and 20 kilograms of spent grains. And we'll be adding 120 grams of lysine and 130 grams of methionine. And then we'll be adding our minerals and vitamins and then our additives just like before. Now this feed has a crude protein content of 14.2% and a crude fiber content of 6.5%, which meets the requirements. And then for our feed 6, we'll be using 45 kilograms of maize, 15 kilograms of cassava meal, 12 kilograms of soya beans, and 28 kilograms of PKC. Now this feed needs 100 grams of lysine and 160 grams of methionine. And then we'll also be adding our minerals and vitamins and our additives just like previously. Now this feed has a crude protein content of 14.3% and a crude fiber content of 6.6%, which meets the requirements that we want. So you can see that for all these feed formulations, they meet the nutritional requirements of crude protein, crude fiber, and then we've also topped up the lysine and methionine content. So this feed is standard for gilts. Now, if you have any of these ingredients, you can combine them in the ways that you want to generate your feed. So now we're going to go ahead and make our 6 formulations of feed for our multiparous sows. Our multiparous sows need a crude protein content of 12 to 13%, with 12 being the recommended levels, and then a crude fiber content of about 5 to 6%, even up to 10%. You know that the high fiber content is good for sows. Unlike in the growing stages of the pig, that is the starter grower, and then the finisher stages. For the sows, they need the fiber because we don't want the sows to get fat. We don't want to overfeed them, but then we also do not want to starve them. So we give them a higher fiber content. And you know that fiber is bulky. So the bulky nature of the fiber will make them feel full. So when they consume the required amount, you see that because of the fiber, they feel like they've eaten so much and so they'll be okay. And with this, we can prevent overconsumption of feed or overconsumption of nutrients, which will make them become fat. So now let's move on. Our multiparous sows also need a lysine content of 0.6% and a methionine content of 0.37%. So just like we did for the gilts, we are going to use the Pearson square to generate our first feed formulation, and then we'll use the try and error method to generate the rest of the 6 formulations. So for our Pearson square, we'll be using the conventional ingredients: maize, wheat bran, soya beans, and then fish meal. So for the cereals, we'll be combining maize and wheat bran in a ratio of 2:1.5. And then for our proteins, we'll be combining soya beans and fish meal in a ratio of 2:1. And then our crude protein content, let's put that in the middle. We need 12%. So doing all the calculations per all the figures that I've given, 100 kilograms of feed for the pregnant sow, that is the multiparous sow, will be 53 kilograms of maize, 40 kilograms of wheat bran, 5 kilograms of soya beans, and 2 kilograms of fish meal. So now let's bring our table. So this feed we've generated is our feed one. So let's insert that. We have 53 kilograms of maize, 2 kilograms of fish meal, 5 kilograms of soya beans, and then 40 kilograms of wheat bran. So for this feed, by calculation, you realize that it does not meet the lysine and methionine requirements. So we'll be adding about 100 grams of lysine and also 90 to 100 grams of methionine. And then for our minerals and vitamins and then the additives, we'll add the same as we did for the gilts. And that is 1.5 kilograms of dicalcium phosphate, 2.5 kilograms of premix, 300 grams of salt, 80 grams of toxin binder, 100 grams of enzymes, and then 100 to 200 grams of probiotics. That can also be added. Now for this our feed one, it has a crude protein content of 12.1% and a fiber content of 5.7%, and that meets the requirements. We said we need crude protein of 12 to 13% and fiber content of 5 to 6%. And now we have this figure, so we meet the requirement. So now let's go ahead and then use the try and error method to generate our remaining 5 feed formulations for our multiparous sows. So our feed one has only conventional ingredients. So for the rest of our 5 feed formulations, we'll be incorporating our alternative ingredients. That's our groundnut cake, cassava meal, our spent grains, our PKC. We'll be adding that to the feed. For these feed formulations that I'll be generating, I'm not adding bone meal and blood meal, and I've told you why. So now let's make our 5 feed formulation. For our feed 2, we'll be using all the fiber ingredients. We'll be using wheat bran, spent grains, PKC, and then we'll also use our maize and soya beans. So we'll be using 60 kilograms of maize, 5 kilograms of soya beans, 15 kilograms of wheat bran, 10 kilograms of spent grains, and 10 kilograms of PKC. So if you look at this feed, it needs 140 grams of lysine and 100 grams of methionine. So we'll add that. And then we'll add the minerals and vitamins and additives, the same quantities that we added in feed one. Now for this feed, it has a crude protein content of 12.6% and a crude fiber content of 6.9%, which meets the requirement. So let's make our feed 3. For our feed 3, we'll be replacing some amount of our maize with cassava meal, about 20% replacement. And then we'll also be adding some PKC to our feed. So we'll be using 47 kilograms of maize, 13 kilograms of cassava meal, 2 kilograms of fish meal, 5 kilograms of soya beans, 20 kilograms of wheat bran, and then 13 kilograms of PKC. Now for this feed, we'll be adding 100 grams of lysine and 120 grams of methionine. Then we'll add our minerals and vitamins and then our additives just like before. For this feed 3, it has a crude protein content of 12.1% and a crude fiber content of 6.2%. So now let's make our feed 4. For our feed 4, we'll be using 55 kilograms of maize, 20 kilograms of cassava meal, 5 kilograms of soya beans, 20 kilograms of spent grains, and then we'll be adding 160 grams of lysine and then 130 grams of methionine. Now let's add our minerals and vitamins and our additives just like before. For this feed 4, it has a crude protein content of 12.2% and a crude fiber content of 6.7%, which meets the requirement. Now let's make feed 5. For our feed 5, we'll be using 55 kilograms of maize, 2 kilograms of fish meal, 3 kilograms of groundnut cake, 20 kilograms of wheat bran, and 20 kilograms of PKC. And we'll be adding 160 grams of lysine and 100 grams of methionine. And then now let's add our minerals and vitamins and our additives. Now this feed 5 has a crude protein content of 12.4% and a crude fiber content of 6.7%, which meets the requirement. Now let's make our final feed 6. Now for our feed 6, we'll be using 50 kilograms of maize, 20 kilograms of cassava meal, 7 kilograms of soya beans, 10 kilograms of spent grains, 13 kilograms of PKC, and adding 130 grams of lysine and 140 grams of methionine. And then we'll add our top up minerals and vitamins and then our additives. Now for this feed 6, it has a crude protein content of 12.5% and then a crude fiber content of 6.5%, which meets the requirement. So if you look at it, all these 6 formulations of feed meet the requirement for multiparous sows. So you can give any of these feed formulations to your sows. Now note that if you make your own feed formulations and it doesn't meet the requirements of the sows or of the gilts, then they'll have to consume a greater amount of the feed. So instead of maybe consuming 2.5 kilograms, they'll have to consume maybe 2.8 kilograms before they are able to get the adequate nutrients that they need. Do you get it? So for you to be able to follow the kilograms of feed that I have stated that you should give the pigs, it means that your feed formulation should also meet the nutritional requirements that I have stated over here. So in our next video, we'll be making lactation feed for our sows. So stay tuned. And probably in the next one, we'll then make the feed for our dry sows and gilts. So I'll see you in the next video, and it's a bye for now. Bye bye.